Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald!
From inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal. From inside the centre. Foul. I can't believe
What a game. Hello, everyone. This is Americans Watching the Footy, episode 153. There's got to be some crossover with people who listen to this and people who watch Review Bra. So I'm your host, Ethan Castle.
I'm also your host, Benjamin Castle, and Brian Harambe is sleeping at Ethan's feet, sprawled out, which is the cutest way for any cat to sleep.
It's better when he's like lying on his back, but this is good too.
Yeah, this is pretty good. He spent a lot of time with me this morning during the nightcap. So we're recording this Sunday night American time, so Monday morning into afternoon Australian time. Pretty quick turnaround for us here, as we'd like to do for these recaps. And don't want to waste much time here. I think this is just going to be an analysis-heavy sort of recap.
Well, I do want to throw in a couple of things. So, as we've mentioned before and are going to continue plugging, we are doing our own Brownlow voting this year. I came up with something else in addition to that last night, as inspired by the final game of the round, where I thought, and I've seen this in a couple of games, where the losing team didn't have anyone to merit Brownlow votes, but had one guy who definitely stood out. And for that, I have come up with a new award.
Introducing
the Polished Turd. So basically, instead of a 3-2-1 system, it's just, if you're the best player on the losing team in each game, you get one vote. There will be no votes if a game ends in a draw. Nobody's received multiple votes yet,
but the spreadsheet is public. We currently have it pinned on our Twitter. Not sure how long that'll last, but it's already gained a bit of interest. And if Glicko likes it, I think that's a pretty good sign.
But yeah, this was kind of a round that was low on narratives and main characters, and was just, I mean, the narratives were more from like a team perspective, bigger picture stuff,
like overall game perspective rather than like,
the biggest narrative, spoiler alert, is that both teams that made the grand final are 0-2.
Yeah, and, well, you had a thing going into this round, Ethan, about really looking at teams that played in opening round, play against teams that didn't.
Yeah, and they went 3-1. It's funny, though, because one of the winners was a team that got off to a lousy start, and then the one loser got off to I don't know how much it was them getting off to a great start and how much it was just their opponents shitting the bed. But, yeah, so that, I think there might have been some correlation there, although at least one of the games was kind of a foregone conclusion, that being GWS's win over North.
Let's see how quickly we're going to get through that one. No big stat reads anymore for us.
Yeah, that's one thing we're doing to shorten time a bit. One other thing, I thought of something the other day that we should have done in the season preview, and so I'm doing it now. You know, I'm a big fan of The Draw. I wasn't until I discovered the It's a Draw song, but I've decided, let's predict a draw. So my prediction for this year is going to be Port Adelaide at Gold Coast. I believe that is round 18. I was just thinking, which teams haven't been involved in draws for a while? No other logic to it. Not, I think these teams are evenly matched or anything. Just, it's due to happen eventually, right?
You tend to just have some, very vibes-heavy picks.
Port at Gold Coast, round 18. That's what I'm going with. What's your pick?
I'm going earlier. I think we're going to have just something really weird, and I don't know, Hawthorn seems like it has been a draw magnet. They had 2 draws a year ago. I just feel like they're going to have something weird and have another. How about Dogs and Hawthorn round 8? Because that matchup kind of went weird last year. It's always competitive, it seems, and I think it's going to see some weird stuff again.
Dogs haven't been in a draw in a while, huh? I feel like they are a team that would end up in a draw in a game that they should win.
The Bulldogs have not been in a draw since 2008, round 5 against Richmond, an extremely high-scoring draw, 130 apiece.
Wow. All right, that's a fair pick.
Yeah, that might be a record for highest scoring draw.
I don't know, there were some scores in the 80s and stuff that were insane. Like, there was a game where Hawthorne had 24 behinds by halftime against the Saints. I was watching the Port Eagles game last night. Dad was there, and he wanted to know, what's the record for behinds in the game, and I found it, and it was like something in the 40s.
Well, Port broke their own record, but that's not until the Sunday action. Shall we get on with the early week games?
Yeah, let's do it.
So Carlton 12-14-86, defeating Richmond 12-9-81. I had gotten back from San Diego a few hours before this, and I was very tired during this. Went back to go through a more complete watch. The Blues just never make things easy for themselves, similar to a way that the Pies have the past few years.
I think it's a little bit different because Collingwood at times has been like these dramatic comebacks, whereas Carlton, it's been tight the whole way, whether they should pull away or not.
I guess the game-winning goal belongs to Adam Notwolf-Chera,
who didn't really have a great game otherwise.
Yeah, but with...
Well, are you counting it as like the NHL does, with not the go-ahead goal, but like the one that ends up holding up as with the final margin?
Yes, like the game-winning score. So to take Carlton in this case over 81 points, and it was Chera with about 13 and a half to go. Few teams this round just kind of petered out in terms of their scoring in the fourth quarter and managed to hold on. And I don't think there was any like huge management, like game management things that led to that. There was just some late surges. The concerns about Carlton's defense were necessary going into the season, but they've kept a couple teams with some high-scoring targets into the 80s to start things. Minus Jacob Weering, also no Caleb Marchbank.
I mean, he's always hurt.
Yeah, true. More pleased with Brody Kemp from this game. Those the more ball-moving players out of defense for Carlton that really caught our eyes. Firstly, of course,
hello, Newman.
My sleeper pick last year and keeping things up strongly. And not just a ball mover, but roving from halfback the way that we always knew that he and his brother could. Mitch McGovern commanded this game, and in the second half, Richmond did a lot to go down the line to avoid McGovern, and he still had his say inside 50.
Well, I thought more than anything in the second half, he just kind of forced them over to other guys, because they were trying to avoid him, which I think is a compliment that, he necessitated a halftime adjustment. I know a couple of people, like, I think Rory, a.k.a. Glicko, was not super complimentary of Uze's coaching, but I thought his halftime adjustments in this game were actually really good. The one critique I had of Uze was that he didn't bring Noah Balta back up at the end of the game, but Richmond had been shredded by injuries. So first, Dion Prestia, hamstring. He's taken out a quarter time.
You said, Ethan, after that happened, that Dion Prestia has an Eagles hamstring.
Yeah. Then Josh Gibcus went up for a mark, landed badly. Me turned the other way, carted off, ACL. They zoomed in on it. Some people didn't like that. I didn't mind.
I think we just kind of are desensitized to that.
No, it's just like, I don't like how soft people get with like not showing injuries. I mean, you don't have to show it a billion times, but like, let's inform people. And they did that.
Unless it's like, something that's just like absolutely awful to see, like the Jeremy Howe or Kevin Ware type.
Oh, even then. Like, I mean, how often do compound fractures happen? I think it's kind of like, give people a heads up like, hey, if you're squeamish, look away.
If you don't want to know the injury, look away now. But Gibcus just absolutely luckless. Good start in 2022. Hamstring wiped out all of last year, recovered in Qatar, then one complete game in 2024, was starting to get back into things, and there he goes. One of these that you'll probably see some other youngsters get some chances on the outside, kind of out toward the flank.
This could be a Hugo Ralph Smith opportunity.
I mean, you always say that, and it never ends
No, but I think this one actually could be.
It never ends up being. The type of guy that I'm thinking of here is maybe Sam Banks, who could definitely go from the wing back toward halfback. I think that would make sense there. And the focus will remain in terms of fullback on Tyler Young.
Yeah, Tyler Young, I noticed he had landed hard going for a mark in the defensive 50 and like kind of shook off the trainer, but he was like rubbing in the back of his head. And then
soon enough,
it seemed like early in the third quarter, he was going to pass concussion stuff and get back in. And then he didn't. And so they were playing with a two-man bench the rest of the way and still nearly pulled this off. I mean, you can look, both teams missed a few really easy shots, and you could say, Carlton had more of them just off the fact that they had
14
behinds to Richmond's 9. But I do think of a couple of really bad ones that should be noted. One where Lockie Fogarty had numbers ahead and kicked to nobody. And then on Richmond's end, they had a chance to go up by 13. Would have helped them in a pretty tight game come closer to pulling away than anybody had at all.
I mean, any of multiple of 6+1 is a big deal.
But Ryan Mansell,
this one.
Great work with the body to win a holding free kick against Zach Williams, and then he just clanked this snap off the post instead of taking his time to actually take a real set shot.
Yeah, this was late third quarter, I remember.
Although I think the Tigers actually lost this game a couple moments before that, because on the prior goal, Tim Taranto kicked a nice snap, but he didn't say holy fuck after.
Was that in a win that he did that last?
I believe so. Yeah, I think it was against Hawthorn or West Coast.
You know what? That might have been the great 1-point ending against Hawthorn where Coulthard made his debut and Liam Baker had the late winner. It was either that or a launch against Port when he had 4 goals and they lost.
It was July 21st. We tweeted that.
That seems like the correct date for Richmond and Hawthorn. 96-95. It was that date.
Well, July 22nd in Australia. But yeah, they would have won if he had said holy fuck.
Couple bad misses for Charlie Curnow as well. I really see that this game was won in defense between McGovern and Newman doing their job.
I will give Curnow credit, though. Been a lot of talk about how Carleton keeps winning close games. They've won, their last 6 wins have all been within 6 points, and I think a lot of that has to do with what Curnow does when he drops back as a defender.
Did it on the Gold Coast last year to secure their finals berth. That's one that really stands out.
Did it again here. I thought he was phenomenally prevented an intercept mark. I mean, he had an intercept mark, then he had a spoil on Tom Lynch along the boundary, and if he ever stopped kicking all those goals, there's a place for him as a defender. Also,
and in terms of defense on Richmond's side, big credit here too, but we'll just say he got the polished turd vote for this game. And
easily.
Oh, and we always considered him for the opening round 1 too. I said from the start this year, and I said it last year as well, if Richmond are going to be any good at all, then it really relies on Nick Fostone being just the excellent back 6 general that
he was more than good.
That we know he can be, drifting away from his assignment, getting the intercept, starting play out. You always see him directing traffic, and he does a damn good job at it. And I think with so much focus on guys like Dusty and Tom Lynch, when you talk about their flag era, I think oftentimes Fostone just gets overlooked in terms of how structurally important he is to Richmond.
The go-ahead goal was set up by a 50-meter call that I don't know if I agree with. Twitter thought it was terrible. I don't know. I thought the prior call was way worse. So Richmond had a couple misses that would have put them up 2 goals, not just the Mansell one, which was awful, but then Lynch missing on a set shot. Noah Balta has a great chase down tackle on Matthew Owies that somehow called a push in the back, which was just unbelievably bad. There have been a lot of bad push in the back calls. This was the worst.
Yeah, the softness for this we've seen over the past.
What is he supposed to do differently on this play? Tell me what he's supposed to do differently. Don't tackle him. Just let him score.
Let him go earlier. Try to turn him.
He has to run around him.
Yes, you've got to run around him and give him a full 1 Mississippi before you tackle.
Yeah, this was bad. Then came a 50 to Liam Baker for, I guess he knocked the ball out of Tom DeConing's hands.
Whether or not
DeConing more dropped than anything.
Whether or not it's inadvertent, they make those delay of game calls very quickly these days. So I didn't have as much of an issue with that one. Just one other thing that I want to highlight here for the Blues. Corey Durden, interesting sub call to me. And coming on for Take It Away, BT.
Orazio Fantasia.
Yeah, Orazio had a couple misses. Wasn't his best game. Just it did seem like for like in the moment. Just wouldn't expect a forward type like Durden to be in the sub role, but it worked. And then credit to the person who was the sub last week for, a solid outing, a 20 disposal, 3 clearance outing for Jack Carroll, who kept up enough in the midfield and allowed Paddy Cripps to venture forward at times. And when you have this whole list shuffle that you need with Sam Doherty out along with the other defensive injuries, that's a valuable piece to bring in.
I do want to mention, there were a couple of awful calls against Richmond late. There were a couple of really bad ones against Carlton in the first quarter as well. Lewis Young called for a really bad front-on contact against Tom Lynch, and then also not getting a call when Noah Balta clearly pushed off against him. So umpiring was bad both ways. It was not what decided the game. One thing, if you want to talk about players from Richmond that look like they're getting towards the end of their career as they're aging, hate to say it, but Dylan Grimes, if you were just going off this game, he looked pretty washed.
Yeah, I mean, not a great start to the year. Not as strong in either a one-on-one or a sweeping fullback job anymore. One of the lowest ranking players on the ground, just outdone by targets of various sizes, especially with the taller targets close to the goal. That's continuing concern, and especially with Tyler Young out for their next game as they take on Port. Considering what Charlie Dixon did on Sunday.
Yeah, that could be bad.
Yeah, Charlie Dixon, Todd Marshall as well.
Jeremy Finlayson, even though he just couldn't kick straight.
Yeah, just Port have enough tolls to really punish Richmond.
Yeah, that could be a problem. I will say, though, 29-year-old Nick Blostone looks like he could do this forever. I will mention, I didn't think Cripps did anything special, but I'm sure the umpires did because 31 disposals, 21 contested possessions, and 7 tackles.
Oh, yeah, he's probably getting the 3 votes here because it's Paddy Cripps.
We're not telling you what our vote count was, but it will differ from the umpires.
Oh, it will because, obviously the TV perspective is extremely different from the on-field perspective. I'd like to think that we get more of a full oval view. Yeah, but also there are a lot of things that are sight unseen for us. So I imagine that somebody will be passionate enough to bitch about our votes too.
I hope so. Collingwood, 10-9-69. Nice. Defeated by Sydney, 15-12-102. First off, should we talk about the pregame events? I think it needs to be mentioned. At first, they were going to do the flag raising or unfurling like an hour 15 before the game, and they ended up doing it like 30-ish minutes before. And there was a lot of talk that just like there weren't enough people there for it. And I get the logic, and I'm not sure if this was McRae's decision or whose, but it's like, we need to move on from last season and we've got to win now. Yeah, but they could have done something with it. Maybe like right before the team ran out was one suggestion I saw that I thought that was pretty cool. Kind of be like a transition thing.
Yeah. The question is, how do you honor those players without making it too much about them? Like how Stanley Cup banner is unveiled. Like, there's no ring presentation then like in the NBA for celebrating whoever wins in the NHL, but they honor the players, have them come out one by one, and captain brings out the trophy. They quickly unveil things, and that's usually like right before puck drop.
Yeah, there are ways you could do it that make it closer to game time.
As Geelong did last year.
Yeah.
And my pick for main character didn't even play Tom Mitchell. Managed. Weird call. Like, that doesn't strike me as a management. That strikes me as a dropping after being subbed down. I was surprised the call was so quick, but
I think there was some soreness he's managing.
More than
one of those things where like you can disguise it because he's older.
More than anything, to me, it was a sign that Scott Pendlebury felt more ready to go and was definitely active in terms of on the stat sheet, just engineering more off the midfield, off bounces. 26 disposals, 15 contested, and 8 clearances for him. Looked a lot more like himself. Cannot say the same yet for Jack Crisp and Steele Sidebottom, who were just such important presences in terms of on-field leadership and production during the flag run last year. Sidebottom in particular, just not looking up to par on the outside. And with Errol Golden pushing to the outside and doing well there, that was a matchup that just did not go Collingwood's way all night. Josh Dacos was always there on a wing as well, but also got outdone. The wings were definitely Sydney's area.
Yeah, Crisp was just hardly noticed in the first couple games, and Sidebottom was a step, if not multiple steps, behind
for the first time that we can remember.
We did get to see Magpie Jesus for the first time this year. I did some Twitter searching. I think his name is Mark, but Collingwood have a serious problem on their hands. I'm not trying to overreact to the fact that they're 0-2. They can make those games up. They've lost to 2 good teams.
It's more the defensive issues without Nathan Murphy.
Yes. They missed Dan McStay up front, clearly,
because Ash Johnson is not the player that we thought that he could be.
At the moment.
At the moment,
We can get into that discussion in a minute, but defensively, without Nathan Murphy, it means Moore has to go into one-on-ones, and you don't have him and Quainer roving as much. And tall forwards are just lighting him up. In this case, Logan McDonald.
yeah, Logan McDonald kicking for 2. Joel Marty with a much better game than the "you suck" sub that he got in opening round. Just outdid Darcy Moore in that 1v1 as I expected him to do. It just seemed like a simple game plan, but it totally worked. It's like, this is where Collingwood is weak. We know that because they don't have this one person. Let's exploit it. John Longmire does it right again.
Isaac Heaney and Chad Warner both played great.
Heaney staying more inside again, as with Warner, that accelerator that we know he can be. I'd say those two are probably up there in the votes for most people.
See where Nick Dacos fits in, though. I mean, he did have... I thought he and Braden Maynard were Collingwood's 2 best players. I will say that.
37 disposals and 7 clearances.
It's not the volume of disposals, just he took advantage of space pretty well.
Yeah, I mean,
moving swiftly.
that
was not the reason they lost.
That's what he always doing. But in terms of actually taking advantage of team-wide strengths, the Swans did that. On the outside, exploiting side bottoms, weaknesses, but also just inside with their speed and their aerial strike. Warner, one of the game breakers there in terms of the speed in particular, and they often work from inside to outside, and my sleeper, Braden Campbell, was one of the most important ones there on the outside. Really did nicely as a flank in both halves of the oval, and it's just a pure long kick of the ball, too.
Oh, yeah, and it was Logan McDonald's night.
And in terms of the 50s, yeah, this was McDonald's night. How quickly do the Swans try to lock him up?
I don't know. See what they do with, academy stuff moving forward. You got to always factor in what they can do in trades, but...
I mean, this is his contract year, and Frio are lurking.
Just the point is, he looked good, and Collingwood, I wouldn't overreact to much, but giving up 100 in back-to-back weeks is not good. Getting shredded by tall forwards in 2 straight weeks is not good. And they have Max King next, and if his first kick is a good one, watch out.
Sorry, just going back through these tweets here, you want to talk about like the defensive structure blow-up? Jack Crisp was on Isaac Heaney in the defensive 50 at one point.
What's got to be frustrating from a Collingwood standpoint is they patched up the holes from the prior week, other than the tall forwards lighting them up, but a bunch of new leaks sprung. They did not have a good game. And I'm not overreacting to the fact that they're 0-2. They will need to figure some stuff out.
And they don't have much time to do it with the Saints coming up, and then Holy Thursday at the Gabba. That is
make that like a true desperation game. If both teams come into that win list, that would just be awesome theater.
I mean, that just already strikes me as desperation, even if Collingwood comes in with 1 win then. And I mean, so much is always made out of the 0-2 start being so damning, almost as a death sentence for the team. Well, if that's the case, then we're going to have some real final shakeup this year, and all just kind of springing out because of one person not being there.
I mean, I think their problems are bigger than just that, but it's, last week, last week it was efficiency.
It's the persistent problem.
Yeah. I thought their efficiency inside 50 was better this game. Their forward play, even though no one guy was that good, was better.
Lachie Schultz looking more in tune with things.
In the second half, at least.
Yeah, he had a couple, one right after the final siren, but still, not having the sorts of misses that he did before. They did fix things immediately on ball, do decently on bounces. Center clearance is 17-9 in their favor, but it was after that they just didn't have that run that somebody like Jack Crisp or Jordan DeGoey could often provide.
17-5-107 defeating Hawthorn, 11-17-83. Tight game until the fourth quarter. Both teams pretty short-handed. Archie Perkins really made the most of Darcy Parish's absence and a couple other key outs for Essendon. Perkins really took over this one.
Yeah, Perkins scoring 2 goals off 24 disposals, 12 tackles, and 8 clearances, and gaining over half a kilometer as well. I knew he always had this potential going from the midfield into a small forward spot. Always a strong kick, but didn't see him just being as prominent in terms of the pressure. You would think of someone like Jai Caldwell to really fill that in, and Caldwell did that as well. But Perkins, in terms of actual productivity, was the main character of this game. The main character in actuality, though, was, of course, James Sicily, who is already challenging a suspension at the tribunal because of
just a bit of banter.
After the first goal he upended Andrew McGrath and kicked him. McGrath didn't even realize it was a kick, but
It wasn't as much of a kick as it was like a trip, but it could have resulted in a pretty significant injury.
Essendon, meanwhile, have accepted Mason Redmond's 1-game suspension for a high strike of Jai Newcomb, which was just after that, just all very early on after the second goal. So,
By the way, gonna take a while to get used to Mason Redmond with short hair.
that's up there with like Ed Langdon with normal hair and Brandon Starcevich being
I think Redmond's the toughest one to get used to, though, just because you always think of him as long hair guy.
just like man bun guy.
Yeah.
I mean, you see man buns from anywhere, but he's not Ibra, so he shouldn't have a man bun. The other reason why I'm glad that I mentioned Sicily early is because really there isn't that much to mention about his game because he was outdone by the showerhead, Matt Guelphy.
First quarter especially, Guelphy was awesome.
Yeah, a couple goals and 4 assists for him, just consistently beat that matchup. Just the annoyance factor was there. Usually you see him being a little further upfield, trying to kind of spread the ball to the next targets, as we talked about with the showerhead. But he managed to drive Sicily a bit deeper while still retaining his impact in some of Essendon's faster passages. This was a very strong welcome back game for Matt Guelphy. That burst from stoppages, whether it was Perkins or Will Setterfield clearing well, or just Zach Merritt being Zach Merritt, meant that Essendon were able to produce a lot more scores right off that stoppage success, 9-3 coming from their stoppages. Obviously, the big talking point for Hawthorn, in turn, aside from the Sicily suspension, though, is the inaccuracy costing them, which also did him in last year. Jack Ginnivan and Dylan Moore were accurate.
First half, Ginnivan was great. Then I thought Essendon did a really good job clamping down on him.
Moore was more of the kind of breakout forward in the second half, but those two kicked 5 straight. The rest of the team combined for 6-17.
So kind of a carryover of some of last year's problems for Hawthorn. I will still say, yeah, it's round 1. I'm not going to worry tremendously about that yet. If it becomes a common thing, though.
It's a real watch. I mean, this was just a matchup that just didn't fit Hawthorn as soon as you saw even the slightest of accuracy issues, because Essendon have the ability to neutralize a lot in the midfield. Will Setterfield did that on Jai Newcomb, and meanwhile, Hawthorn didn't deploy their tagger until the early fourth quarter, and he didn't really tag. Why was Finn McGuinness your sub when you had easy tagging targets from the beginning like Zach Merritt and Nick Martin? That's a misstep from Sam Mitchell. And it's one of the few that we expect from him, just because we both really like the way that he and the club are going about things. So it's a good one to highlight here. There are times to deploy a tagger later on in the game when there's like one clear target and you're trying to reinforce things, I think. This was not one of those cases.
I mean, there was one clear target, that being Merritt since no Parrish. I mean, both these teams were pretty shorthanded.
Nick Martin, as he goes inside more, ends up being that reasonable tag candidate as well. So I think I would have expected that Merritt would have gotten the tag, if anyone, and maybe could have shifted on to Martin if kind of the vibe changed. But yeah, I was thoroughly expecting a tag from the beginning, and we didn't get any. Good game overall out of Essendon's additions. Xavier Dersma was the quietest of them. Still, role player, taking some jobs on the outside. Him going to the wing means that Sam Durham moves inside and looked all right there. But all three of the others were really in tune and notable in their own ways. Jade Gresham keeping up his perfect 1 goal per game average throughout his career with that sort of burst that you were talking about present as well. Going to take some time to get used to him wearing 11. Obviously, Kyle Langford's got 4, and he is a forward.
Speaking of new guys, Todd Goldstein did a good job.
Yeah, I was about to mention him. Definitely won the battle in the ruck with 41 hitouts. Good service overall.
I believe he grew up an Essendon fan.
Yes, that's correct. That was part of the draw for him to go back there. And then Ben Mackay had that sort of sweeping last man back role, even as Essendon as a whole pushed downfield. And that's a spot that makes sense for him, especially with his injury worries, particularly concussion worries. He'll obviously have that one-on-one job when they're pressured in defense, and he kept Mitch Lewis quiet. But I also just want to see him continuing with that sweeping job.
Was he amazing? No. I assume if Hawthorn and Kickstrader might have had a couple chances to be a little critical of him, but he fills an important void there, and he looked at minimum sufficient, somewhere between sufficient and good. And they actually have like a proper tall defender now. So good job.
So you think he would go to Logan McDonald then Saturday night?
After the game, yeah, that would make the most sense.
Sydney and Essendon tends to be and with how the Swans have started, I'm really keen to dive into that one.
There was one at the SCG a couple years ago that the Swans won by like 70, but usually it's been a good matchup.
7 of their last 8 meetings have been decided by 10 points or fewer. The exception was Sydney spanking Essendon in 2022 round 9.
By how much?
58.
All right, so I was close. I didn't notice him a ton, but the leader in disposals for the game was Andrew McGrath.
Just the sound halfback that we expect him to be. Good connections and a reasonable efficiency. There's no revelation in anything McGrath does, but in a game where Hawthorn had a plethora of forward chances and didn't make the most of them, it makes sense that he had such a high impact. And one more thing, Sam Frost was in this game, and there was no Frost ball.
Yeah, he just was a okay defender. I didn't think he did anything particularly memorable, which is kind of the antithesis of Frost ball.
I guess that's a tick for Hawthorn then. Actually, you know what the other big tick is? Massimo D'Ambrosio.
Yeah, he was good.
Go between halfback and half forward. A lot of half forward time for him. 29 disposals and 11 intercepts. A right place, right time player. We saw that in his far too limited time at Essendon. And I'm happy for him to get a more consistent look at Hawthorn. Also, we need BT to really draw out his name like he does for Orazio Fantasia, Massimo D'Ambrosio. How quickly can we do this? GWS 17-19, 121, defeating North 13-4, 82. Josh Kelly's 200th game versus his father Phil's club. And whereas North were able to do things immediately off clearances, they could not stop any run through the middle. Tom Green ran rampant to the tune of 37 disposals, 14 score involvements, 9 tackles, 6 clearances, and 497 meters. He was the right captain's pick. I'm very glad I did that. And I mean, that was the real story there, considering it was 36 scoring shots to 17.
Yeah, this could have been a lot less close. Basically, North's defense was very poor, not just in their own 50, where they obviously miss having a presence like Ben Mackay. Toby Pink was okay. Aiden Core missed some time for the blood rule, wasn't especially good.
And my sleeper Josh Goder did his Achilles.
Yeah, very late in the game. I thought he actually had been okay. The 2 most positive contributors I noticed for North were probably Charlie Lazaro and our polished turd pick, Callan Dawson, although I thought Tristan Jerry did a good job. If there's anything to be concerned about for GWS, it's that Kieran Briggs has gotten off to a bit of a slow start this year.
I mean, some tough matchups right away for Briggs, and I would love for Cherry to be able to take that next step with Todd Goldstein now out of the picture, and maybe the helmet is helping him do the job.
But yeah, North's defense goes beyond just struggling in their own 50. In the midfield, it was very poor. It was really easy for GWS to slice through them, whether it was long runs or Green's accuracy on long kicks. And yeah, this is going to be a team that's going to give up triple-digit scores a lot if they repeat what they did here. I will say, they were good at turning clearances into scores. That was something I definitely noticed. But yeah, if they weren't getting clearances, or even if they kicked them behind, it was just way too easy to slice right through them. And that's the biggest thing that's going to have to get a lot better as the season goes on.
Appreciation, of course, for Luke Davies-Uniacke for being that midfield leader for North, especially in Simpkin's absence. Tom Powell was really the next man up there in terms of clearances with 6 of his own.
I noticed him.
Yeah. And
I also noticed Bailey Scott.
Scott is always kind of one of those next ones up into the half-forward line.
Zach Fisher had a good start to the game, but then kind of became turnover prone.
Yeah, see, it seems like, pretty typical for him. And of course, very happy for the first goal for Zane Dersma. We've talked with his father, Dean. Of course, you're going to remember that first one. It was just, would have been nice had this just been a more positive game all around for North. It seems more just like confirming the status quo.
Yeah, I mean, they've got some ball movers, but just they have nothing to offer any sort of resistance right now to anyone, and that needs to change. A stat that's really telling to me, GWS 9 bounces to North's 1 just tells you how much open space the Giants had to work with running through the middle. And congrats to the Giants on their first ever home win over North.
Yeah, they had previously lost,
I think 4?
Yeah, 4, 3 of them at the Showground, I believe, or NG Stadium as it now is. Never surrender, even though you're sponsored by the French.
Yeah, it doesn't add up.
Yeah, and one of them in Canberra. The Giants have another chance at history this coming week on the road this time because they're going to the site of their strangest defeat last year. And once again, it's round 2 against West Coast. In many ways, I really see the Giants as having a 3-week bye because it's North, then West Coast, then the actual bye. And then I'm now extremely disappointed by the fact that their matchup against Gold Coast, this expansion extravaganza, will be in front of a tiny crowd at Summit Sports Park.
I think it's kind of awesome. Can they get the camera angles better than last year? Because that was frustrating to watch. If yes, I will enjoy the shit out of that. Couple really quick things before we put a wrap on this game. I know Jesse Hogan had 6 goals, but I actually thought Jake Riccardi was the most impactful forward for the Giants, the way he was kind of attacking from different angles. I know he and Hogan each had 3 assists, but just Riccardi opened a lot of things up for everyone else and also scored himself.
Whereas Hogan is the strong hands anywhere, Riccardi is definitely the more mobile of the forwards. And I think that was what ended up getting him time last year ahead of Aaron Kapman. And it's something that is continuing to breed good things for them at the start of this year. He's got good mobility. Callum Brown, for his size, also has good mobility. And I noticed that they always refer to him as an Irishman. I wonder how many people get irritated by that because County Derry is Northern Ireland, and also he was born in England, in Luton. Just a small thing there that I'm sure that some very proud Northern Irishmen would get very, very angry about watching this game.
Also, I know Sam Taylor got the 3 Golden Fist votes, and he played well against Larkey, but the defenseman who impressed me the most in this game was actually Jack Buckley, who just since the second half of last year has just been on a heater.
You have 2 of the best one-on-one defenders together in GWS's back line. He took a few contested grabs and helped launch some more scores as well, which is something that I really appreciate from him. Led the game with 6 score launches, even more than somebody like Tom Green. And when Green was getting all the ball that he was from the center, that really says something.
You know, Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did.
How did you know that number, Ethan?
Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters.
Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed.
It's so easy you can edit it while drunk.
And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do.
Best of all, it's completely free.
Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint.
Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
Just want to take this time to thank you all for listening to us and just following how we think about the footy from our very outsider perspective, very new to the game still. This is just our 5th season following the sport, but we've just gone head first into it. And I think we're doing that even more with America's Brownlow and the Polished Turd. If you want to keep track of that especially, we'll give updates on that along with all our other footy thoughts on our Twitter at Americans Footy. We're also under that handle on Instagram and YouTube. Individually, you can find me on relevant social media at BenjaminHK01.
Find me at Castle Media. Brian Harambe is, I don't know where he just went.
He's just patrolling the room right now.
That's what's up with him. That's what's up with other people.
He's on Instagram at cat named Griad. You will probably hear his bells in the background, and I've
Probably heard him earlier.
Yeah, I love the sound of cat bells.
I'm more like when he makes noises, whether it's like the little trilling or type noises he makes when he jumps,
or the chirping that he does whenever there's a light reflecting off plastic. Or sometimes he actually sees birds and insects and just actually does the right thing and talks and chirps then. it's fun just kind of manipulating his world and seeing how he reacts, because Cats kind of like doing that to us. And speaking of Cats, how about Geelong 10-16-76 defeating St Kilda 9-14-68? This was a high-stress fourth quarter for you especially. Geelong jumped out to a decent lead with a pretty good patch in the second quarter, but were never super accurate after that. A 6 behind third quarter set up a stressful finish, and it was a captain's goal that sealed it. Nobody thought Dangerfield had the distance on that except Dangerfield, I guess. In the interviews right after the game, both Max Holmes and Tom Stewart expressed their lack of belief in their captain. Holmes with Dangerfield standing directly next to him. Oh, speaking of Holmes, excellent game from Holmes, going more on the inside increasingly these days, and a strong mark. That said, I think, Saints would have had to go downfield. I'm glad to have avoided the stress. It still would have been tough for them to win at that point because we had done a good job bleeding clock. But looking at this game, first off, I hate playing the Saints. I do not hate the Saints. I respect them even when they're not the most exciting team. I like that they did a great job proving me wrong the last couple of years. I like that they have a decent-sized Jewish contingent in their fan base. They are so frustrating to play against, especially under Ross Ball now, just with their ability to slow games down and just magnify every mistake you make as a result, because just in lower scoring games, there's that much more impact. It's a weird combination of things on this current Saints list. The combination of Ross Ball with the ability to just slingshot ahead and have a good forward crop in a healthy Max King and Tim Membry. The outside ability you never doubt with Jackson Clare in there. But wait, he wasn't in there this game. Liam Henry, welcome to the Saints. Maybe not the most efficient ball user, but a very noticeable addition on the outside. I'm looking forward to seeing how the Saints manage things with him and Sinclair in there. I would say put them on opposite sides and let them both wreak havoc. Yeah, I know his disposal efficiency wasn't great, but I thought he was excellent. I thought he might have been the best player on either team throughout the game. Just every touch he got, he managed to get the ball from a contest and then take it out into space, and just his speed was really good. Even if the kicking accuracy or a couple of the decisions to kick weren't great, I really, really liked how he played. And we've been talking about for years, just wondering when Frio's going to learn how to properly use him. Well, the Saints have a good idea of how to keep him in there. They've got a good idea of how to employ multiple newer pieces, with Riley Watts-Bonner being busy in defense and often being involved kind of into the center square. And the Saints are a team with plenty of speed in terms of the midfield and half-forward group, able to go over the top to Jack Higgins, who has the ability to run rampant on any opponent. Wasn't his most prominent game, but had his very clear important moments. And I always compare, especially with the excitement that he has for big moments, to a combination of Chad Warner and Tom Papley from a Swans perspective. He had one really nice spoil to set up a Tim Membry goal. I think it's easy to say after this game, I was more impressed with the Saints than any of the other losing teams, even though we could have buried them earlier had we been more accurate. I mean, first quarter was a lot of frustrating inaccuracy and just inefficiency inside 50, and then the 0-goal third quarter. But what makes me happiest about this game was the type of game that Geelong loses last year. They give up the lead and they don't get it back, or they give up a late dagger zone. There were a bunch of times where it felt like they were going to lose this game, especially with the Saints having the strong motors and stamina where, if Geelong is too old and too slow, when are they going to run out of gas? Some of the younger players definitely had their big impact earlier, thinking the likes of Ollie Dempsey, for example, who shook off a couple awful early kicks to kick 3 goals when he previously only kicked 2 for his career, and be a player that I believe won the Roll of Honor from the Hoops crew. That just shows a ton of maturity. Also, apparently he and Sam DeConing live together and cut each other's hair. I wouldn't be surprised if Zach Guthrie's in on that too. They were asking that on the broadcast, like Haim was asking, what about Zach Guthrie? What does he do? But yeah, for somebody who's still a pretty raw talent with, of course, we got to say it, Ethan, a basketball background, to be able to put those early mistakes behind him and have the impact that he did is really, really encouraging. And also on the other side, whereas Jai Clark didn't have a huge number of touches, he was always present at doing the kind of difficult, less desirable tasks in the middle. And he has also signed on through 2026.
he was only credited officially with like 1 tackle, which is wrong. I just thought everything physically kind of stemmed off of him, and there was just that sort of presence and leadership wasn't there last year, whether it's Dangerfield stepping up in the fourth quarter or just guys being more willing to take on contests in the middle of the ground.
Tanner Bruin was among that group as well.
First half, I thought Bruin was probably best on ground. Didn't do much second half, neither did Clark. If they can parlay their first half performances into an entire game, that's honestly terrifying. We were on our heels for a lot of the second half and still managed to tough it out. And I think, at this time of year, stacking early wins is important because it changes how you can manage guys. And just, from a standings perspective, it's nice. But more than anything, it's nice to be able to win when you didn't play your best game and you want to still have things to work on because you don't want to be a finished product at this time of the season. You don't really start to round into that for round 18-ish?
Yeah, like the 3-quarter mark of the season. The whole goal is if you get those early wins is that nobody's lulled into complacency. And this is the type of game where certainly there's not going to be complacency after this. The 4 points are satisfying. The youngsters doing their job. It is great to see early on. I know he's not young, but on debut, Sean Manna looked like he belonged in the 22 and was unlucky to not get his first goal.
Yeah, had one smothered and then a late dribbler that got touched just across the line by Wilson.
Yeah, I think he would,
but the kick that got smothered still ended up, there was still forward pressure put on after that. It was Zane Cordy who had the smother, and then Dangerfield intercepts Sharman's kick and kicks the goal to put the game away.
Yeah, so still, important in terms of advancing and keeping the Saints defense on their heels. Where would you if you put Manna in? Who's the first one to come out?
I can't believe this, but maybe Tyson Stenkel?
Well, that was what the sub was. They credited that to some cramping. Not sure how quickly they would actually drop Stengel to the 2s. Another one that comes to mind, I think for both of us, because we talked about it off mic, is Zach Tui. Even though he did have one important goal, he's a good sub candidate in the first place because of his versatility, and at an older age, it would be nice to be able to manage him like that as well.
Here's the thing. Tui did not have a very big impact on the game, but played a good fourth quarter, had a huge late goal.
Positives all around for the Irishman, kind of branching off from Tui. Well, Sheen Mullen did decently in the VFL, plus signed on for another year. And Mark O'Connor, not a tagger, would have maybe thought that he'd get one on somewhere in the midfield, maybe, I don't know, trying to stop Higgins's branching out impact, but looked like he belonged on the outside. I think, and that was part of what allowed Holmes to go inward.
Yeah, I think we have something here with Mitch Duncan had some time on the wing as well. So O'Connor and Duncan playing to the outside with the young core of Bruin, Holmes, and Clark in the middle. We'll see. They'll be tested this coming week against the Crows, but I think there's something there. And Tom Atkins, ordinary game for him. Not a ton of tackling, but a lot of contested possessions. Oh, I don't know if we mentioned earlier. James Rowbottom's 13 tackles. Did we mention that during the Swans game? Maybe not.
Not sure if we did.
But Atkins does some Rowbottom-y stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Not quite the same player, but anyone who tackles guys a lot, I'm going to say James Rowbottom's name.
Well, unless it's Matt Rowell, in which case he is just Matt Rowell.
Yeah. Jake Kolajashny redemption arc. I can't believe I got this long into the game without talking about Jake Kolajashny.
Yeah.
When lineups came out, I said Jed Buse should have been over him. He did not have a single bad kick. He helped advance play forward and did a good job in marking contests in the defensive 50. He was really good, and not just that, but like a reinvented version of himself. I thought totally different type of player than he had been even in 2022, and I really liked it. I think he had 1 assist. I was surprised to find that he had a season with 6 assists. I was hoping it would be like, the goal count and the butt tattoo, but
would it be like on the other cheek for his assist if you thought so?
Nah.
Well, Kolajashny's intercepting ability had been there, but didn't think of him as being the accelerating type. You'd always think of like going back towards Stewart for that or letting Buse do that on the outside, but he had more of an active role in moving things ahead. A lot of credit to the Saints for working in their newer players well. When you talk about the Saints having that slingshot ability, obviously you think about the pieces that were already present. Higgins going forward from halfback Naziah Wagedy Miller as rounding into a very complete defender. would probably be up there among their best.
His ball movement abilities are quite good.
Yeah, I mean I guess that's just a Miller thing and a Wanganine thing as well. He's just got great footballing genes from both sides there. But going right along with Higgins, able to go from the center into the forward areas, and with a bigger body than Higgins too, is their first round pick, Darcy Wilson, who used his size and his endurance to advantage to get a couple goals, and also was able to support in defense in some important moments too. Very good early signs from him, and Lance Collard showed well as the sub. So a good start for the first rounders for the Saints. Obviously, big test coming up for them this week against Collingwood. How far inside do you want to play Wilson there? They also look they could get Sinclair back for that game, and with how the Pies were exposed on the outside with bad games from both Josh Jacobs and Steele Sidebottom, I think there's a lot that the Saints can do in front of, it's still going to be an away crowd. It's technically a home game, but it's at the G.
Maybe with it being Spud's game, maybe it can be 50-50.
Spud's game at the G I like. But yeah, I can see the Saints doing some real damage on the outside. And with the defensive worries, if they run hard enough into the forward 50, they can do a lot in the air and on the ground.
I think I already mentioned if Max King hits his first shot, could be a really fun day.
Tim Membry is kind of in the same boat there.
He was their best forward.
Healthy, strong mark, strong finisher. With what he's gone through in terms of his physical and mental roadblocks, he's a player to whom I've really taken a liking and some sympathy, so happy for him to get on the better side of things, even in a defeat.
Couple things I didn't mention. Negatives in this game. I mean, Zach Guthrie wasn't great. Mentioned Zach too, he struggled a little. Sam DeConing still not playing up to 2022 form. Hopefully just first game stuff. I would have probably liked to see Toby Conway over Reece Stanley, who I thought wasn't great.
Yeah, pretty strong.
Dropped a mark that led to a goal where the Saints cut it to 1.
And in general, Rowan Marshall beat him.
You know what I noticed watching Marshall? The way he's able to body people out before he even gets up in the air is pretty unique. And
with the ability now to be able to have those straight arm blocks in there too, legally, if you still contest, that can be really damaging. I think Marshall's immediate positioning can be up there with what Grundy has done in past years and in the opening round as some of the best out there. And Marshall can even do that when he's just got one shoe. Wait, where'd the other go?
Oh yeah, Brian yeeted his shoe. I thought it was really funny. I don't think it was that big a deal, but
they kept going on about it because
people made a big deal out of it.
It's not like a Jarrett Jack situation where he yeeted it into the crowd.
It was funny though.
Yeah, or used it to block something. Here's a question. If somebody blocks a kick with a shoe and the ball actually travels somewhat of a distance, does that go down as an effective disposal for the player who's holding the shoe or the player whose shoe it is?
Ooh, I think the guy holding it.
It would be really funny if it just randomly showed up on someone else's Telstra tracker. Any good Telstra tracker stuff this week, Ethan?
Until the fourth quarter, I think it was, Isaac Heaney kind of looked like a penis.
Yeah, that's kind of what
it looked less so later, but if you want to see it, no context AFL on Instagram.
Yeah, that's kind of what you look for in terms of the Telstra tracker there, or otherwise just some crazy numbers.
Anything else here? Jeremy Cameron didn't have his most accurate game, but hit a couple of really tough shots that most guys wouldn't even possibly consider trying. So it was just a reminder of where high-end talent bails you out.
And at the very end of the game, Tom Hawkins and Joel Selwood had a bit together on the mics on public address, which was great. Nice way to kind of close out things at the opening of the stand named in his honor. Over 39,000 there, the largest crowd at Virginia Park since Easter Monday of 1981.
By the way, surprisingly large Saints contingent, and they made a lot of noise, and I think it kind of inspired the home crowd to match that energy. On one hand, I thought it was fun, that we stuck the away fans in some little section on the wing a couple years ago, and you don't get the vision of them reacting when a goal's kicked right in front of them, but it is nice to have them back behind the goal.
I like the SEC style very top corner treatment.
Yeah, it wasn't top corner. It was still ground level.
You stick the band way up there too, and make them have to leave the stands with 8 minutes left in the second quarter to get on the field for halftime.
Why is the away section at the SCG a couple sections off from behind goal? That annoys me.
Does it annoy the fans too? If so, job well done.
I just think visually,
Yeah, it is strange. I have noted that in the past in games played there. Gold Coast 8-12-60 defeating Adelaide 8-6-54.
The mighty Sun! Yay! 2-0!
Maybe the most misleading score of the round? I mean, Essendon Hawthorn was a little misleading. I guess you could say Melbourne Bulldogs was a little misleading, but I think this one really doesn't tell the full story.
It was a completely different vibe from the first three quarters to the fourth. 7-9, 51 to 3-4, 22 at three-quarter time. Crows looking absolutely lifeless, just not able to move the ball at all in periodically very wet and rainy conditions on the Gold Coast. The waterlogged footy had a real impact. A Falcon nearly took Jared Witts off his feet. And when you see someone like that going down, that tells you just how heavy the footy actually was.
Not the best Falcon of the week.
No, there was one in the NRL that was like a real woozy moment.
Yeah. The slow-mo was awesome. They included it on Bounce, which, by the way, great to have Bounce back.
Seems like people are very polarized by Bounce, and there are more people against it than for it in the Twitter circles.
I think it's the greatest show ever.
It's weird because the people that we talk to get the comedic side of things, but maybe it's just the particular personalities they're not fans of.
You know what was surprising? I thought the best segment, Turn It Up was good, but Andrew Gaze going through the ladder was way funnier than usual this week.
Maybe it's just because of the weirdness of couple teams.
No, it was just he had a bunch of really good little one-line singers.
Okay. Well, yeah, this was an extremely different game between the first three quarters and the last. Here's an example. The Crows scored 3 goals from their first 40 inside 50s, and they scored 3 from 6 in a patch in the fourth quarter, scored 5 goals in a row to bring it back to an 8-point margin. We said that the 2 Rs would need to be much more consistent goal scorers for them to be in games, if not win ones they couldn't last year. And lo and behold, Rankin and Rochelle both had that sort of impact in the fourth quarter. Didn't really hear any big booing against Rankin from the Gold Coast fans for whatever reason. Maybe it's just because there weren't all that many of them.
And people were just wet and undercover.
A wet 11,000 or so there. They took whatever shelter they could because it doesn't just drizzle in Queensland.
I said this about Adelaide too, and sometimes Perth.
Maybe it's just an Australian thing. They don't have light rain. You guys don't get light rain like
Melbourne gets some.
Maybe, but in most of Australia doesn't get light rain like we do, at least in the Western US.
No, it was dumping for significant portions of this game.
Yeah, the Crows Smalls worked well from the center. Jake Soligo injected a lot of the right energy as the sub and should have been in from the beginning. We're both big Soligo advocates here, I would say. But the Suns managed to hold on because of some clutch defensive moments, a couple rushed behinds from their defensive stalwarts, Sam Collins and Will Powell. Powell, not as big a volume of touches, but still got into the double digits for intercepts and could factor into some people's votes. For me, though, this was much more of a midfield-centric game, which makes sense considering the conditions and just how much of the game, out of necessity then, is played on the deck. And the Suns' midfield group of Matt Rowell, Noah Anderson, Tuke Miller, and stupid sexy Sam Flanders, along with some of Jared Witt's delivery and clearance ability by just being a hit ball ruckman, wreaked a lot of havoc in this game. All 4 of the mids that I mentioned got their hands on it for so much of the action, and Rowell worked through a lot of attention. It was Sam Berry right at the stoppages that are showing out of Berry, including some half-forward craft. Glad to see him back after not showing much in the past year or two. And then it was Jordan Dawson after the stoppages that gave Rowell the most attention, and he worked through him too. Looks like another best-on-ground game for the Grass Eater.
I didn't watch this one super closely. I'm going to probably tonight. By the next time we record, I will have more opinions.
Yeah, I think that'll really work into the preview there.
But, it was not a close game most of the way. Geelong was close. I paid attention to the final minutes. When I did watch stuff, I noticed a lot of Ben Ainsworth.
Ainsworth with a couple earlier goals and causing the live trumpeter to play celebration after the first goal, I kind of thought, oh, crap, Gold Coast can't lose from here in like a very Leonardo Puglisi type way. But they did their job, just kept working out that margin early. When it came to actually contesting with that huge group of Suns midfielders, Matt Crouch was the best Crow throughout the game. Had to work really hard to get himself 33 disposals and 7 clearances, and had more of the on-ball work than fantasy god Rory Laird. It's good to see Crouch finally be in the main midfield group again, because of some of the Crows had really been missing the past couple of years. I think just out of stubbornness from list management, because Crouch had been putting good numbers in the 2s for a while, and you'd seen the impact that his brother had at the Saints, and they never put 2 and 2 together for some reason. Did the Crows miss Taylor Walker this game? Yeah, I'd say so, even though there wasn't a whole lot of aerial attack. Just having him there present in some of the ruck work in the forward 50 really could have helped. You know why he was hurt, Ethan? You said I know it's a back injury, and you said he got hurt picking up his kid. Yeah, tweaked his back while... It's like a very baseball injury. Tweaked his back while picking up his child at home. It made me think of things like Sammy Sosa, who hit over 600 home runs, throwing out his back while sneezing and missing like a month. Matt Cain of the San Francisco Giants, guy who pitched a perfect game, was once put on the then called disabled list, now injured list, because he cut his hand when he was cutting a sandwich into, as he said, fancy triangles. Well, there's other stuff with like Derek Holland tripping over his dog. Guys getting hurt, because they like punched something while they were playing video games. Detroit Tigers reliever Joel Zumaya jamming his thumb on his pitching hand while playing Guitar Hero. That is like the big one there that comes to mind. Just like weird freak baseball injuries that you only hear about with baseball players because they are the silliest of the American athletes. Like even more so than hockey players, and even more out there than some actual or scripted wrestlers. This just felt like a very baseball injury from a player with definitely a baseball name. The stat that tells me the most about this game, efficiency inside 50, 39.2 to 29.6. Well, it goes right in line with what we were saying about the Crows not being able to generate much in terms of scoring from entries for so long in the game. As Mark Howard said, they came late, but they didn't come enough. We've had some sexual footy moments this round, huh? Yeah, I think it was it in the Melbourne game? Or was it in the Port Adelaide, Port and West Coast, like talking about a bump and like wasn't sure if he got the head? Yeah. It was a Dwayne Russell moment. Yeah, but the hashtag I'm using is sexual footy, and maybe also footy after dark. Yeah, but this one was... The thing is, everything for us is footy after dark, pretty much. Yeah, but this one was, you hope he didn't get head. Yeah. I don't know why you would ever hope someone didn't get head. Yeah. Man, does Dwayne Russell have it in for Zach Butters? One last thing to close out this game, because this is something we found out after the fact. It happened off camera. Mal Rosas, who was off to a good start this year, headbutted Max Michelini and is suspended for 1 game. Did this game have some, 2020 vibes to you, just between the small crowd and the low score? I think wet footy is just its own vibe and not necessarily 2020. Yeah, but also just, there were so many games at, what's now, People First Stadium. It's still Metricon to me, damn it. If it were clean conditions and it were this sloppy, then yeah, that would be 2020. All right, but wet footy, it just struck me as a Queensland wet footy game. All right, and we've seen plenty of wet Queensland footy. You're still mourning the fact that we don't have any Cairns games. Or Townsville. There have been a couple of games in Townsville. Yeah, that was before our time. Melbourne 16-13-109, defeating the Bulldogs 9-10-64. Remember how last week I thought Melbourne was one Kazi Pickett away from having a shot to beat Sydney? Well, they had him, and he kicked a really cool snap right off of an inbound. Yeah, that was the one. He kicked that around Adam Treloar, I think. Yeah, that totally pushed aside Lockie Bramble for that as well. Just out-muscled him and kicked around. It was one of the coolest goals of the week. Probably not the goal of the week, but it was a cool one. Yeah, and it was a very Kazi moment. Best thing about Kazi's game as well is that Kazi being in there did not take away from Cade Chandler. I have said for multiple years now that Pickett and Chandler can easily coexist at the AFL level. They are not mutually exclusive. Chandler is able to do more, stay close to the forward 50-yard, anywhere in that half-forward group, whereas Pickett can have an impact anywhere just from his willingness to leap and his ability to just burst out, and a flashy and a good way game from Kazi and a 3-goal game from Chandler tying his career high just very much validates my belief.
Jacob Van Rooyen is so much more fun to watch than other tall forwards who just take marks and kick goals, and I don't know why that is.
I think having Ben Brown in there and Brown just kind of being back to himself meant that Van Rooyen was able to do more in terms of the center third of the field as well. We saw that last week also with Josh Shackey being in there, but with Shackey not being a huge contributor, we thought maybe they could have used Van Rooyen deep. If Brown is back to being competent, and probably because he's got his hair back like a Samson thing, that helps. But if they have the capabilities of a deep forward like Brown, then Van Rooyen can open up his game more. And I think that's what makes him entertaining. What is it that you saw?
There's just something about the angles he takes and the moments he impacts game. He's just fun. I wish I could come up with a better definition of it other than that I enjoy watching him.
He knows when to crash. Pac's good at being that extra in there. I think he might have learned that from his captain, because Max Gawn can certainly do that more so in the back third. Van Rooyen with a 3-goal game also, and the third one he fittingly kicked into the Dutch flags. Oh, wait, those are Bulldogs fans?
It's time to talk about the Bulldogs, and I will not be positive when I do so.
I just want to say just how funny it is that we see just like Bulldogs fans bringing the Dutch flags and having them in their Twitter bios and things.
That's like how St. Kilda, you can do it with the Yemen flag.
Do they just put big Yemen flags and just like rotate them 90 degrees to make them the same orientation as the jumpers?
I don't know.
Doesn't work for many teams. We can make it with those. But yes, the Bulldogs. Marcus Bontempelli did his thing
in the first half. Second half, I didn't think he was all that effective. The
high volume from Libba, Treloar, obviously.
I barely noticed Libba, even though he was high volume.
Best dog, our polished turd winner,
Jason Johannesson. I considered Treloar.
I did too, but Johannesson did more to open up the better work for the Bulldogs. It reminded us of just how good he was for them and how much he opened the field up for them the first part of last year before he did his hamstring. You would not think from the way that he moves that Johannesburg's Johannesson is 31.
No, not at all. But my issues with the Bulldogs mostly stem from lineup decisions, like Caleb Daniel being the sub. I thought at first he should have been in over Lockie Bramble, who was the one taking kickouts and maybe has some extra fantasy value because of that. But Bramble, other than getting shoved aside by Pickett on the way to that really nice goal, had a good game. And he had a nice move up the wing and actually kicked a goal himself. It was a pretty nice one, so he shut me up.
Yeah.
I hate to say this, James Harms was the worst player in this game. I am a big James Harms supporter, or Jame Harms, and he is just a single Jame, but he was not good, and he would have been the one I subbed out, and I wouldn't have had Daniel as the sub. I would have had Daniel in the main 22.
Well, with Daniel being the one there, it would have also just made sense with Daniel doing the outside work, going toward half forward, as he's been moved up there for 2023, which did work. It was unexpected. So, that was an actual, good thing that Beveridge did, I guess. I don't know. Instead, they subbed off Riley Sanders, who had decent volume, did have a couple costly giveaways right before, but I'm surprised they were so quick to pull the plug on him.
I thought he was solid.
Aside from those couple giveaways, yeah. Definitely some field kicking issues there. Took a little too long at times and telegraphed things. He'll grow into the game. And while we're on the subject of Bulldogs debutants, nice start for Harvey Gallagher after injuries kept him from an AFL appearance last year.
Yeah, he looked very polished, did a good job sneaking forward at times.
Yeah, just active game all around the forward 2/3, contributing everywhere. The right type of guy to be an extra, just a good rover, and he got his first goal too. In terms of the biggest positive for the Dogs, I would say just Johannesson being back to himself, and Gallagher right alongside that would be the two biggest individual positives for them. And probably their biggest positives, period, because the structure was not a positive for them, because it's the Bulldogs. What was going on defensively for them?
I mean, Liam Jones did all right in his role, but other than that, jeez. Buku Hamas was okay, other than a late turnover. It was just
glad to see Buku come back in and actually have time. Friend of the show, doing decent work at center halfback. But just in terms of overall positioning, there were just so many lapses and just jogging moments when there needed to be more pace on it and closer play against the forward targets.
I just thought, defensively, more than anything, it looked like, if you look at the Alex Neil Bolin goal early in the second quarter, it was just like, the spacing was terrible, the effort looked bad, they were getting totally out-hustled. It was frustrating. This is a team with so much more talent than they play like.
And yes, really nice roller from Neil Bolin. Clayton Oliver working hard, going kind of underneath at times to do his best work. He seems to be right back to his normal form, very productive in contests all over the field. But as much as Melbourne were successful on that play, and as much as I really like those players for them, it's the Dogs' ineptitude there that stands out with me.
Oliver was very good, looked like himself. Christian Petrarca was excellent, I thought.
I mean, the two of them are probably going to be up there as your two best on ground alongside Max Gawn, probably completing it if Bontempelli just doesn't get votes because he's just Bontempelli. Petrarca, I did more in terms of going into the forward 50. Oliver did a lot of stuff like on the edge, like kind of the 60-meter range to facilitate good entries.
I thought Petrarca impacted a larger segment of the ground than Oliver did. Petrarca, especially in the fourth quarter, getting into the forward 50 to help put the game away.
And that's typical that Petrarca has more of that forward job. Some people were surprised that he didn't get a position nod in fantasy this year just because of the time that he does spend forward.
Set shot accuracy wasn't great, but I thought Jamari Ugle-Hagan was pretty good.
The most effective of the forwards consistently, a couple early moments from Aaron Naughton, but overall, Jamara had the greatest impact.
This team reminds me in a lot of ways of the Angels, except I don't hate them. Just the wasted talent.
I'm not sure how many people in Australia follow the Anaheim Angels.
They should still be called Anaheim. They are definitely not Los Angeles, but they suck. They waste talent, and now Shohei Ohtani is a Dodger.
I was going to make an Edmonton Oilers comparison, but the Oilers are doing things this year.
I mean, they still, their playoff success has been marginal, but I mean, there is more of a lack of depth. I mean, this team has a lack of depth too, but the lineup they put out there look pretty damn good. When you look at the names, you look at the one-on-one stuff, and then collectively, it's going to take a lot more than a couple of good games to win me over, just knowing their history, even if you shake this one off as that's round one.
Here's something that I would have done structurally from the beginning. You saw how in the season opening game, Jake Lever was really limited by Robbie Fox just sticking with him, being an annoyance, preventing him from going over and being that extra. We may have talked about it in the preview. Cody Waitman made sense as that type of player to take that type of role. Sure, he started on the bench. Sure, Rory Lobb started on him, but it doesn't have to be one of your talls that does that annoyance job. In fact, it's better if it isn't one of your talls, that they could get freed up by a mid-sized forward just impeding Lever. Waitman won a free against him en route to a goal, and there wasn't enough of that consistently. If I can be making these observations from across the ocean and being very much comparatively a novice to footy, why is it that Luke Beveridge and the Bulldogs staff aren't pushing these buttons, moving these magnets, any more cliches you could fit in there?
I have no answer.
And actually following up from things that other opponents did. It's as if they aren't studying their opposition.
They can go out and, well, actually, I also don't think they're studying themselves, considering they had Caleb Daniel as the sub. They can go out and beat the Suns at Ballarat, and they could go and beat the Eagles the week after that, and then play Geelong in the gather round. They could win a whole lot of games before I'm actually won over by anything they do.
Are we even going to be won over by them if they make a finals run?
They'd have to do a lot to win me over. I'm going to be skeptical. And it was frustrating because I like their players. We've had good interactions with their fans. It's just...
One last thing. Credit to the Melbourne supporters wearing the Brayshaw helmets behind goal as a tribute to him. Also nice that Angus is now part of the coaching staff, and with some roles on game day as well, like they're really making his helmet a thing. I like it.
Kind of like a player of the game thing, like, that's especially common with NHL teams, they give the player of the game, like, I don't know, a wrestling belt or a hard hat, or the Flyers have like the dog mask. Yeah, I think it's cool.
And you know what? I think the Dogs were paying tribute to Angus Brayshaw as well, because they started the game with their helmet off the field too.
Port Adelaide 16-24, 120, defeating West Coast 10-10-70.
You know what, Ethan, as the non-Eagles member and somebody who wasn't watching this game closely, I want to hear your observations first.
Eagles defense bad. Tom Barris totally outclassed by Charlie Dixon, and if any of Dixon, Todd Marshall, or Jeremy Finlayson kicked straight, this could have been really ugly. Jeremy McGovern, the one good Eagles defender, when they got forward, which didn't happen often, but when they did, I thought Jake Waterman did a really good job connecting things and making things happen. Harley Reid took on the game physically. Esava Radagalea looked pretty good. And
that's all I have to say about that.
I posted this on Twitter, a sliding doors thing for Damian Barrett. If Port's compass had actually pointed toward the big sticks, then West Coast would have had the triple-digit margin against that they deserved. Adam Simpson and company have done nothing to improve their defensive structure. Obviously, it's hard to offload those premiership players, and at this point, just riding out the contracts is kind of what's necessary. But damn, the fact that there's just no better matchup against someone of that size is just frustrating in so many different ways. It shows you just the impact of not having someone like Shannon Hearn in there as well, because even if he wouldn't have been the best one for it, he would have been better than Barris. Glad that Charlie Dixon is back to better health and had a few goals. He's a player that we just noticed right away and started liking. I think early on we made comparisons between him and Calvin Johnson in terms of American football in that All-Australian 2020 that he had. But also he did have one real stupid one where he decided to play on, and Jeremy McGovern was like, nope, you're not doing that. I don't know where the Eagles would be without McGovern, and I fear for the day he retires. Other Eagles observations, yes. Harley Reid took the game on from the beginning, belongs inside. They pushed him out at times and didn't work as well for their structure, especially with worse kicking from Liam Duggan and just a down game for him in his first as co-captain. I really would have preferred more of Reid on the inside. He ought to get his opportunities. He'll get a first goal soon enough. Unfortunate that Kelly Underwood will have a permanent place in the Harley Reid highlight reel because she called like the first stuff for him. She also confused Tyler Brockman with Tim Kelly, I guess, because number 10 and number 11 look similar when you're calling the game from the fucking studio. Weird one in terms of the actual forward time for the Eagles in that they didn't have the delivery to the talls like Oscar Allen. He was goalless. But Allen took the initiative and did more going back upfield to just be the solid mark that he is and keep things moving with accurate kicking. Jack Petricelli getting 3 goals was very unexpected, especially because it wasn't mostly just from like running through and utilizing his speed.
1 or 2 of the goals were garbage time, but
I think the Heat was largely kept on though. But Petricelli has always been a decent field kick, and I'm glad for him to actually get some time. Hopefully, once they can get some better positioning and delivery to Allen, they can have Petricelli do more of a roving job into half board and be able to really utilize his speed in terms of contest as well, or be like the guy right off the ball for some overlaps. But nice to see a little bit of a different side of Petricelli.
I mean, we really gave America our best, throwing this game on FS2 with Dwayne Russell, Kelly Underwood, the Eagles. At first, I almost had Dwayne Underwood, who pitched for the Cubs and Pirates.
Of course, you make the baseball connection, as always.
That was an unintentional one. I thought both ruckmen played pretty well. Now, the hit-out numbers were not favorable to Bailey Williams, but he had a goal right off of a ruck contest and ended up with 7 clearances, and I thought Ivan Soldo looked really good.
It had been tough for Soldo to get opportunities behind the likes of Toby Nankervis and in terms of ruck forward combo, Tom Lynch. There was skepticism that maybe the Giants would look for him before 2023. Of course, now that Kieran Briggs has started to do his thing, their desire to do that in the offseason was nil. And with Port needing a complete revamp of their rucks, I was glad for him to get the opportunity at a club that we, in general, like. And for him to be able to flex forward is really nice as well, because Port have done well even when they haven't had a true ruck, with Scott Lysette being so injured these past couple years. You've had Jeremy Finlayson take on a lot of that responsibility. Don't think we'll see much of it from Charlie Dixon just for the sake of him staying healthy. So I think Finlayson would be the one to really take on that responsibility if you keep Jordan Sweet as an emergency. And it's weird to think of Finlayson that way when he was the leading goal kicker for the club last year, but with his accuracy not being as strong in the past year plus, getting him in the ruck might be a way just to really maximize what you can get out of him. And if it allows Soto forward for him to do well there, I think all the better. Also, rucks tend to look better when you have a good midfield around them. And when you have a group of young mids like new captain Connor Rosie, new vice captain Zach Butters, Jason Horn-Francis, Willem Drew, to move the ball out off those initial hit outs and just make everything seem like it's really flowing from the center, then yeah, you'll put a more positive spin on the rucks. Not to detract from Soto at all. He was quite good. Who was it that you really noticed in this game? You talked up Kane Farrell to me.
I like Kane Farrell.
Happy 25th birthday to him.
2 goals, 10 score involvements, just active in general on different parts of the ground. And I know he didn't score a goal, but I like Todd Marshall just being able to open up the forward line at different angles.
Both able to open up the field, Marshall on the receiving end through the air, Farrell making it happen on the ground with just pure long kicks. He is one of just the best long straight kicks in the game. And those are types of players that are valuable to have just to shake things up at any time. Marshall will straighten things out. I would not be shocked if he ends up the leading goal kicker for the club this year. And Port really have an opportunity to wreak some havoc, as we mentioned earlier, as soon as Saturday night at the G. Oh yeah, Yvonne Soldo returning to play Richmond in that one too.
I would hope he gets received positively.
I mean, Premiership player, good servant of the club, just
never really had his spot there.
Yeah, so obviously there will be booing, just because that's how it is, especially with the big 4 clubs, it seems. But I think, in retrospect, Richmond fans probably have good things to say about Soldo. 14-9-93, defeating Brisbane 10-10-70.
Whoa! Where did that come from? Whoa!
Yeah, this was definitely the biggest surprise of the weekend. Brisbane, just outside of the first 20 to 25 minutes, looked plain bad, and Freo just laid harder. I think this is a reminder that there is no such thing as an easy trip to Perth, even against the Eagles. It's easier, but it's not easy.
Giants will still smash them.
I would think so. I mean, I think realistically, West Coast and North have such massive defensive issues that they're clearly well below the rest of the competition right now. Trying not to overreact to one game, but with what we know. Anyway, Rio looked like wooden spoon material for the first few minutes. They were down 25-2 with barely 8 minutes of clock time gone. Couple of terrible 50-meter penalties. And then they just started playing harder and better.
I don't know what it was that just clicked in them. I mean, was it Sam Switkowski sparking them with that over-the-head goal?
That, and he had a couple of really nice spoils. I know his numbers weren't anything special, but he played his ass off. If we're looking through Frio's list and just trying to pick out players for awards and stuff and America's Brownlow and coaches votes, I mean, there are a couple obvious ones at the top, but you can honestly recognize like at least 10 players the way they played this game. James Aish, who was wearing 1 glove like Michael Jackson. Jai Amos ended up with 4 goals off of only 6 touches.
I really want to highlight Aish when you're talking about things, because I think in terms of structure, he had one of the biggest roles just kind of fixing things and plugging holes in game. He started on the wing, as he's often done. But when Oscar McDonald went down, waiting to see if it is, in fact, an ACL for him. Hopefully it's not, but we thought the same thing with Kadeem Coleman.
Yeah, you hope it should. Well, Coleman's, I didn't think it was in the moment. This one, you know, you think ACL, you hope it's maybe hyperextended instead, but...
Well, once McDonald went down, Aish slid into a half-back spot and was seamless and retained his ball-moving impact too. Oh yeah, Freo just moved the ball really well out of defense, and that was even with Brennan Cox going forward, and then doing his hamstring. So both teams are definitely coming out of this game damaged between Cox and McDonald for Freo, Connor McKenna doing his hamstring for Brisbane, as well as Darcy Gardner hurting his knee. Well, it's an opportunity for Jack Payne to get back in and redeem himself. But that said, but if
They have a bye this week. It's Brisbane and Carlton off, and then they jump in, with the Holy Thursday game against Collingwood.
and we talked about that as being such a desperation game already, regardless of Collingwood's showing this coming week. But in terms of just moving the ball from defense, Aish and more so Luke Ryan did the hard work there that set up a lot of Freo's best moments.
I loved how Luke Ryan played. I thought he really quarterbacked the entire offense from the back, kind of just directed everything. You could tell he was reading things like one or two more passes downfield.
It's what we think about with Nick Flostone, kind of.
But maybe not as much of a sweeping role on defense, but just even more setting everything up.
And like more aggressive offensively, too.
Mm-hmm.
And while we're praising the Freo backline, welcome the fuck back Alex Pierce.
He only played like this against Geelong last year. He was really solid.
And if you think back to 2022, Pierce's ability to lead in place of Nat Fife when Fife was just almost always out and still keep his defensive impact was massive in terms of their success into September.
Freo finished this game down 2 guys because, well, first they had to burn the sub when Carl Werner got pretty much knocked out. Just a unfortunate collision going for the ball with Lincoln McCarthy. No intent behind it. It was amazing that Werner, he's in concussion protocol now, but this looked bad. Like, up there with Mitch Owens against, I think it was the Suns last year.
And just like Mitch Owens, he returned to the sidelines.
Yep, which is, that's, like, look, torn ACLs suck at all, but you're worried, like, did his brain just get turned into oatmeal? And that he was, like, conscious and just chilling on the sideline watching the game and walking and not falling over. That was good. Continuing down the list here, just going in alphabetical order. Bailey Banfield had to play some defense. Wasn't great, but was sufficient enough because, when you're down to 20 guys, you have to make some stuff happen.
And did spot Freo their first goal as well, when I was thinking, he wouldn't have that sort of offensive time with Tom Emmett stepping up. Glad to see him still get on the score sheet. And Emmett was present too in terms of some setup.
Hardly got the ball, but managed to impact the game.
Yeah, again, he is my Freo sleeper. Liked him from the moment I saw him start off in his debut last year. Mature age South Australian who has gone through a lot medically to get the chance at the AFL level.
Nat Fife was playing in the middle and looks like he's still got it. Which normally, you just think, he's into his 30s. He's what, 30? I thought he was older than 32. He looks older.
Well, and maybe just because he's been so hurt over the years and is a 2-time Bradlow medalist, and we just think of him as just kind of having even more wear and tear on him. But, 32 is old in terms of Australian rules, but him fitting right into the middle allowed for Andrew Brayshaw to have more time on the outside and going toward the wing, which is not something we would have thought of a couple years ago. But between Fife being healthy and some guy named Caleb Sarong having 46 disposals, yeah, you can afford to move Brayshaw outside.
I know you like Jordan Clark defensively. I didn't think he did anything super impactful, but I thought he was solid.
Solid enough to keep Charlie Cameron off the scoreboard, even with Cameron maybe not being up to his best on the night.
Luke Jackson, couple of goals, despite being the sole ruckman, totally outplayed Oscar McInerney. Someone got mad when I said Mark Blitzov's made a unicorn play because only Luke Jackson can be the unicorn, but I do want to throw this back because I totally forgot to mention it. To set up a Tom Hawkins goal, Blitzov's had a hit out to advantage, then rushed past everyone to get the center clearance and kicked it to Hawkins, and that was just really cool. But yeah, Luke Jackson, who, I don't know if his goal is to look like Weird Al, but he's definitely got that vibe right now, which I like.
I'm sorry, there's another guy who looks like Weird Al in the AFL right now, and it's Darcy Burton-Jones.
That's more like 80s Weird Al. Luke Jackson is more recent Weird Al.
Maybe like, without the beard, I would think like Poodle Hat or something like that. But Darcy Burton-Jones looks like he could be starring in a remake of UHF right now, and they said that he belonged out at the Fringe Festival in Adelaide this past week, which I totally agree with the way he looked.
Oh, I just saw a story about some nasty stuff that happened at, speaking of festivals, something at a music festival in Australia where people were passing around some disease, but I had never heard of the term bush doof. A doof is just like an outdoor dance party, and a bush doof is out in the middle of nowhere. And it's like my favorite new term. I just wanted to mention that. Like I said, usually, other than with the Portuguese Manowar, they have better names for stuff than us. I already talked about Luke Ryan. Jeremy Sharp looked pretty good in his first game along the boundary. Did a lot. I liked him.
Did you just skip over Caleb Sarong?
Yeah, we're going to get to him. Sam Switkowski,
we gave him,
9 tackles from a forward position, just incredible amounts of hustle, really worked his butt off. Michael Walters had low possession numbers, but I thought he was pretty active, kind of creating a lot of speed around him. Josh Tracy, I thought, was the best forward in this game.
Best pure forward, yeah. 3 goals and reserve ruck. Maybe with, him being there along with Amos. Is Logan McDonald really that much of a need? And just the fact that we're talking about Tracy at age 21 so positively, along with Amos, who is yet to turn 21, I think we'd almost forgotten about Tracy in terms of previewing Frio this year, just because we were so concerned about so many other things about them.
I mean, I had noticed him last year, more so than, say, Emmett.
Probably because Tracy was out there and doing things to Jalal, whereas Emmett, you hadn't watched either of his games till this fucking year.
But I thought similarly to Riccardi and Todd Marshall, I liked his game because he opened up a lot of different angles for guys instead of just being on the finishing end. And then Hayden Young did a good job moving the ball.
Yeah, I mean, not as much of a need for him to be a tagger with Lockie Neal out. And yeah, the Lions could have definitely used him to stop Sarong. But a 10 tackle and positive movement game for Young.
So, Caleb Sarong, let's talk about him.
Yeah.
46 disposals
and 10 clearances, and just kind of being the Brownlow candidate that we label him as, that I labeled him as. I mean, he is your pick. Yeah, and my logic there, and with Golden moving to the outside, I realized just kind of how short-sighted I was with that, and you kind of shoehorned me into it. I really should have focused more on Matt Rowell with that.
So, here's the thing.
We started out friends.
I don't know what you're referencing, and I don't care. I don't know if there is a more obvious guy to tag in the entire league right now than Caleb Sarong. Similar to the logic of him being my Brownlow candidate, obvious star on a team without too many others, even though there were a bunch of guys who put up star-like performances in this game. And it took until the second half. Devin Robertson followed him really well third quarter. Fourth quarter, Sarong was able to get free a little bit more. This game really turned in the second quarter, and Brisbane, for the second week in a row, has given up a run of 8 consecutive goals, which most teams that have done that since 2021. Let me check who tweeted that. I want to be able to give them proper credit, but teams that have been doing that typically end up at the bottom of the ladder. So that is a really concerning trend to do that in back-to-back weeks. From Emlyn Brees.
Oh yeah, Emlyn's got great map slice stuff now. Love the new graphics that they're putting out.
But yeah, mostly teams at the bottom of the ladder have done this in the last few years.
Teams that have finished in the bottom 5.
Yes,
and then Essendon last year because Essendon 2023.
Well, Essendon last year was their last 2 games, and they were kind of mailing it in at that point. The funniest part is that they gave up 2 separate 8-goal runs in that GWS game.
That was just humiliation.
But yeah, this was weird from the Lions in terms of how much they got out-hustled, some of their kicking inaccuracy when they had chances to really make a dent in the lead and get back in it, losing 3 guys to injury, including a likely ACL and a very, very scary-looking concussion with getting totally knocked out. Those things took some air out of Rio's sails and the crowd, and Brisbane never really were able to jump on it. And twice they gave up back-to-back goals in a 30-second span right off center clearances.
Who are they, the Bulldogs against Melbourne?
First, it was Jai Amos. It was a counterattack that started with a Luke Ryan fist. Frederick and Fife moved it well from the middle, and then Emmett hit Amos. Then Jackson and Sarong clearance, Emmett and Brayshaw handball, Tracy goal. and all of a sudden it's 68-36. And then they did it again in like a 17-second span. Yeah, Brisbane had a few misses that could have made things interesting. It was 75-51, and then Aish had a really nice run down the wing, ended up finding Erasmus, who gave it to Amos for the easy goal, and then Jackson hit out to advantage, and Frederick ended up kicking on the run from beyond 50, which just like...
Perfect Freddie, and I was hoping so much for a backflip in that moment.
I would have liked it. It would have been... doing it in round one, I get there would be some flack for it, but...
You know what?
This is a good win.
A good win, an unexpected win. Like
an unexpected win where, again, you're down 3 guys.
And a solid crowd really making noise and sopping it up. Yeah, I was hoping for a backflip.
I wasn't that impressed by the crowd. Just looked like a lot of empty seats upstairs. It ended up in the 40s, I think.
Yeah, that helps contribute to a record-breaking 413,405 through the turnstiles for this round.
There'll be a meme.
Yeah, Giants fans, I don't care that it's North. Your team's good.
On Brisbane's side, he had good numbers, but Josh Dunkley hasn't impressed me much in either of their first 2 games. Give a little Shania Twain, that don't impress me much. I thought Hugh McCluggage could have really taken over in Lachie Neal's absence. He was okay.
He's never the type to do that on the inside, though.
Not having Lachie Neal definitely contributed to the game Caleb Sarong had, but still, you could have had someone tag him and found a way to make it up in the aggregate. The only real positives for the Lions, I thought Joe Danaher was pretty good in that he's been able to stretch his game and, he's taken some marks out by the edge of 50 and then setting guys up. He can do some stuff on the run.
You want to talk about...
He's become more versatile.
Yeah, and like getting more ruck time has kind of facilitated that even more. And then also in terms of versatile, you got to put Dane Zorko in there too. He was one of the guys that was the topic of discussion last week when we talked about positional versatility. And with the activity he had on Sunday, he fits right in.
Eric Hipwood, 3-1. Oscar McInerney had a lot of hitouts, but I didn't think he did much. I barely noticed him.
Jackson was the superior ruck. So what positives do you take from Brisbane other than Danaher and Hipwood?
Harris Andrews, who, when I was thinking about it after the game, that was what inspired me to create the Polished Turd Award.
Doesn't do one-on-one duties as much, but had to do more of that with Gardner out, and still led the back decently well. Also, we have a new nickname for him, Chafe, or is it Heif?
Cheif.
Yes, this was a typo on a tweet that the Lions put out, and I managed to screen grab before they deleted it. That we will use that, don't worry. We've gone on for a while here, Ethan, I know, and listeners, I know. We're still waiting on the Mark and Goal of the Week nominees at this time, but I think it's fair to say that we have some ideas of the nominees.
Yeah, for Mark, Toby Green took one hanger that I liked. I know it didn't win the
Steel Blue Mark of the Week.
He took one on Darcy Tucker that was pretty good. I know Mabior Chol had one for Hawthorn, and
Josh Weddle had a hanger over Archie Perkins late.
I forget who it was for Hawthorn. It might have been Weddle, but there was like it ended up kind of being a bobbling one-hander that won that. And then Gold, the 3 nominees should be Jeremy Cameron running down the left side,
Kazi Pickett just brushing off Ramblin' going around Adam Treloar,
and Sam Switkowski kicking over his head with his back to the goal.
And I'd say Switkowski would be the winner in the vein of Riley Philthorpe and Cairns. Even though it wasn't that was a match winner, but Switkowski's was a spark.
I have people telling me, Cameron's is one of the best goals of the year. It's like, first off, that wouldn't have cracked our top 3 last year. We were quite spoiled with amazing goals last year. But yeah, I think I got to give this one to Switkowski. All 3 were good. All 3 in the moment were very impressive, and I will not be bothered by whichever one wins, assuming those 3 are your nominees.
And in terms of main character, we said at the beginning of this episode, which was a long time ago, this wasn't like a super narrative-heavy round, but when it comes to things that are still talked about, I mean, I wouldn't put Frio as a main character because it takes something really, really out of the ordinary to make a team the main character. So in that case, the cat's namesake, as the cat is just kind of clawing at the carpet by Ethan's closet door.
Yeah, he's kind of become a second scratching post. But yeah, I think it's got to be Brian for yeeting the shoe.
Ever see a guy say goodbye to a shoe?
Yes, once.
My rationale, by the way, that puts this one over the edge is I want our main character picks to show up on, the like little intro to each round on Brownlow night, and I feel like there's no way that doesn't make it. And they were still talking about it on like Bounce and First Crack and stuff. Also, congrats to Brian on being relevant enough to be in the McDonald's commercial.
Oh yeah, he was in the Macca's commercial.
Yeah, that was just like, that's a big status sim.
Yeah. I think that closes the book on round 1 for us. And yes, some teams have played 2 games. And yes, some seem like they've played 0. And yes, we've already got buys. That's going to be weird. Hey, it means no overlaps.
I'm in favor of that.
No overlaps until the gather round. And I'm not in favor of overlaps during that, but
I'm not in favor of overlaps ever.
Yeah, especially during the
Gather round.
We'll get enough out of that soundbite soon.
Anyway, find us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube at Americans Footy.
Find me at BenjaminHK01.
Find me at Castle Media.
And what's your cameo?
Ethan Castle Sports. You can be the first one to request a cameo from me.
Yeah, and then Brian Harambe is just kind of at my feet right now, kind of going underneath the chair.
Don't forget, he is on Instagram at Cat Named Brian.
When's he gonna eat your shoe?
I mean, he plays with them a lot. Like, when he goes around playing with toys in the hall, he ends up messing with shoes. He likes shoe laces. So it's been done. It's not unprecedented.
Yeah, get more original, Brian Myers.